You can listen to this by audio and pause the audio to follow important page links which are used in lieu of footnotes or references, then resume the audio when you are ready. Robert Welch's prophetic warnings from his speech in 1958, An Insider's Plan to Destroy America, are now a reality in America's politics, economy, schools and society. History and statistics show that communists, everywhere, say one thing but live by a different set of standards and rules. History also shows they will say whatever is necessary to gain power and control and that their endgame is the antithesis of what they say. Everywhere communism has been tried, it has gone badly. Very badly. It has brought loss of freedoms, lack of basic needs and misery, and if you resist you may face imprisonment or death, or both. If you doubt it, look at the contemporary examples of Argentina, Brazil, and Cuba. Statistic chart by Professor R.J. Rummel, Professor Emeritus of Political Science at the University of Hawaii. He has spent his career assembling data on collective violence and war with a view toward helping their resolution or elimination. Historical statistics show communists have murdered over 110,286,000, yes, that's million, people worldwide since 1900. Although in the face of irrefutable historical evidence, the communists today claim it is not true. Influences of communism in America. Responding to the impatience of a new left generation of activists in the 1960s, in his widely cited Rules for Radicals, A Pragmatic Primer, 1971, Saul Alinsky defended the Hegelian arts both of confrontation and of compromise involved in community organizing as keys to the struggle for social justice. And, yes, that is how Barack Obama got his notoriety, also. An American community activist and political theorist, Alinsky, through the Chicago-based Industrial Areas Foundation helping poor communities organize to press demands upon landlords, politicians and business leaders won national recognition and notoriety. Alinsky was an influencer who contributed to the methodologies of the modern-day United Nations Globalist-Socialist-Marxist movements. Alinsky often referred to the book, The Prince, written by Niccolò Machiavelli. The general theme of The Prince is accepting that the aims of princes, such as glory and survival, justify the use of immoral means to achieve those ends. Machiavelli's writing sets readers up for a high degree of ruthlessness and realpolitik, and the book does not disappoint. Subsequently, Saul David Alinsky wrote his book, Rules for Radicals, based on much of Machiavelli's principles for the haves on how to hold power, and for the have-nots on how to take it away. Alinsky recommended working mostly within the system, though in the twisted way Machiavelli is reputed to have done. Below, you will find Alinsky's 13 Rules for Radicals, offered with his provision that political activism cannot be a self-serving enterprise. People cannot be free unless they are willing to sacrifice some of their interests to guarantee the freedom of others. The price of democracy is the ongoing pursuit of the common good by all of the people. 1. Power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. Power is derived from two main sources, money and people. Have-nots must build power from flesh and blood. 2. Never go outside the expertise of your people. It results in confusion, fear and retreat. Feeling secure adds to the backbone of anyone. 3. Whenever possible, go outside the expertise of the enemy. Look for ways to increase insecurity, anxiety and uncertainty. 4. Make the enemy live up to its own book of rules. If the rule is that every letter gets a reply, send 30,000 letters. You can kill them with this because no one can possibly obey all of their own rules. 5. Ridicule is man's most potent weapon. There is no defense. It's irrational. It's infuriating. It also works as a key pressure point to force the enemy into concessions. 6. A good tactic is one your people enjoy. They'll keep doing it without urging and come back to do more. They're doing their thing, and will even suggest better ones. 7. A tactic that drags on too long becomes a drag. Don't become old news. 8. Keep the pressure on. Never let up. Keep trying new things to keep the opposition off balance. As the opposition masters one approach, hit them from the flank with something new. 9. The threat is usually more terrifying than the thing itself. Imagination and ego can dream up many more consequences than any activist. 10. The major premise for tactics is the development of operations that will maintain a constant pressure upon the opposition. It is this unceasing pressure that results in the reactions from the opposition that are essential for the success of the campaign. 11. If you push a negative hard enough, it will push through and become a positive. Violence from the other side can win the public to your side because the public sympathizes with the underdog. 12. The price of a successful attack is a constructive alternative. Never let the enemy score points because you're caught without a solution to the problem. 13. Pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. Cut off the support network and isolate the target from sympathy. Go after people and not institutions. People hurt faster than institutions. Alinsky's rules have been used for anti-democratic means and have been effective in setting the stage for and aiding the Communist Party USA to disrupt and transform America's constitution, legal systems, financial institutions and educational institutions into socialist Marxist systems and the unraveling of the fabric of American society. The Communist Party USA, officially the Communist Party of the United States of America, CPUSA, is a communist party in the United States established in 1919 after a split in the Socialist Party of America following the Russian Revolution. The history of the CPUSA is closely related to the American labor movement and communist parties worldwide. The party was influential in American politics in the first half of the 20th century and played a prominent role in the labor movement from the 1920s through the 1940s. The CPUSA received significant funding from the Soviet Union and crafted its public positions to match those of Moscow. The CPUSA also used a covert apparatus to assist the Soviets with their intelligence activities in the United States and utilized a network of front organizations to shape public opinion. The biggest lie. According to the Constitution of the Communist Party USA, CPUSA, adopted at the 30th National Convention in 2014, the Communist Party operates on the principle of democratic centralism, its highest authority being the Quadrennial National Convention. Article 6, Section 3 of the 2001 Constitution, laid out certain positions as non-negotiable and all of which are now evident in America's political, educational and social constructs. Struggle for the unity of the working class. Against all forms of national oppression, national chauvinism, discrimination and segregation. Against all racist ideologies and practices. Against all manifestations of male supremacy and discrimination against women. Against homophobia and all manifestations of discrimination against gays, lesbians, bisexuals, and transgender people. Among the points in the party's immediate program are a $15 per hour minimum wage for all workers, national universal health care and opposition to privatization of Social Security. Economic measures such as increased taxes on the rich and corporations. Strong regulation of the financial industry. Regulation and public ownership of utilities and increased federal aid to cities and states. Opposition to the Iraq War and other military interventions. Opposition to free trade treaties such as the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. Nuclear disarmament and a reduced military budget. Various civil rights provisions. Campaign finance reform including public financing of campaigns, and election law reform, including instant runoff voting. The foregoing is from Wikipedia, the Communist Party USA. Note, it is important to compare. Number 1, the Communist Party USA's Constitution 2. Number 2, the Preamble, Declarations and Sustainable Goals of the United Nations Marxist Agenda 2030 and Number 3, the Joe Biden American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. You will find the stated goals and methods in all three documents are identical. The only reasonable and logical conclusion is that the Globalist-Socialist-Communist-Marxist movement through the United Nations, over the last 76 years have seized control of the U.S. government. Note, if you do not see this or deny it, you are either a globalist Marxist, a sympathizer or totally unaware of your surroundings. The Communist Party endorsed both Barack Obama, 2009, and Joe Biden, 2020, in their bid for the presidency. The Communists' grand prize is the subjugation of the United States, and with the American Democrat Party in control of Congress and the White House, they are making great strides toward that goal. Their only interruption was the surprise election of Donald Trump in 2017, which was met with the full fury of the clandestine operations of the Globalist-Socialist-Communist-Marxist already embedded in the U.S. government, the FBI and the media. We were warned. We, as a nation, were warned of what was coming and why it was coming in a speech given by Robert Welch, founder of the John Birch Society. Here is the transcript to that speech to the JBS Council in 1958 warning about the eventual overthrow and destruction of America by communists. The video follows the transcript, below. You are a part of that plan, of course, which is to induce the gradual surrender of American sovereignty piece by piece and step by step to various international organizations, of which the United Nations is the outstanding but far from the only example. Now, here are the aims for the destruction of the United States by the communists. Number 1, greatly expanded government spending for every conceivable means of getting rid of ever larger sums of American money as wastefully as possible. Number 2, higher and then much higher taxes. Number 3, an increasingly unbalanced budget despite the higher taxes. Number 4, wild inflation of our currency. Number 5, government controls of prices, wages, and materials supposedly to combat inflation. Number 6, greatly increased socialistic controls over every operation of our economy and every activity of our daily lives. It is to be accompanied naturally and automatically by a correspondingly huge increase in the size of our bureaucracy and in both the cost and reach of our domestic government. Number 7, far more centralization of power in Washington and the practical elimination of our state lines. There is a many-faceted drive at way to have our state lines eventually mean no more within the nation than our county lines do now within the states. Number 8, the steady advance of federal aid to, and control over, our educational system leading to complete federalization of our public education. Number 9, a constant hammering into the American consciousness of the horror of modern warfare. The beauties and the absolute necessity of peace always on communist terms of course. Number 10, the consequent willingness of the American people to allow the steps of appeasement by our government which amount to a piecemeal surrender of the rest of the free world and of the United States itself. Robert Welch's predictions were either the result of privileged insider information or keen political acumen. Either way, Welch's speech bordered on prophetic. The destructive means and methods of the Communist Party, as outlined in Welch's speech, are now a reality in America, and communism is choking the life out of the America's political system, our economy, our schools, and is fracturing our society and has set Americans against one the other. This is not the end of the story, it is merely the beginning, and the question we should be asking is not how did this happen, but why? Why has our government and society fallen prey to the likes of Alinsky and socialist Marxism while ignoring the warnings in Welch's, the insider's plan to destroy America? The answer is both simple and complex. But, if you are a Christian, a conservative and a freedom-loving individual, you need to know the answer and what to do about it. A foreshadowing of the modern globalist-socialist-communist-Marxist movement can be traced as far back as 2242 BC. The Bible, in Genesis 11:1-9, records an event known as the building of the Tower of Babel, a post-flood rebellion against God by Noah's descendants. According to the account, a united humanity in the generations following the Great Flood, speaking a single language and migrating eastward, comes to the land of Shinar. There, they agreed to build a city and a tower tall enough to reach heaven. The Bible reports these people as saying, "Come, let's build ourselves a city, and a tower whose top will reach into heaven, and let's make a name for ourselves, otherwise we will be scattered abroad over the face of all the earth." Tall enough to reach to heaven is a metaphor for man reaching to heaven, making himself God, to accomplish his own desires. The Bible goes on to say that the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the men had built. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they all have the same language. And this is what they have started to do, and now nothing which they plan to do will be impossible for them." In response, God confused their language and scattered them abroad. The effort to unite into a global community has been in the heart and mind of humankind for the past 4,200 years. The aims of the architects of the Tower of Babel was similar to the current socialists and communists, the state being God, from cradle to grave. Although similar to the Tower of Babel, the globalist aims have evolved and developed into greater ambitions than just a global community. The globalists believe they can eliminate wars and disease while creating worldwide peace. Aided by technology, they truly believe they can end poverty and hunger, improve the health of our planet, and create global prosperity for all people. And with an eye to the future, they believe and are planning future colonization of other planets, beginning with Mars, building for themselves a city, and a tower whose top will reach into heaven. See the Agenda 2030. The accomplishment of these ambitious goals are only possible if the world joins together in concert as a global community and submits to a unified global political system of United Nations, a one-world government. The globalist movement which has emerged through the United Nations has effectively employed Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals while adopting the ideologies of the Socialist and Communist manifestos as the framework for this new world order. In case you doubt these movements are communist and Marxist, please compare the steps in Saul Alinsky's book, Rules for Radicals, the warnings issued by Robert Welch, what you see in our government and society with these quotes by Karl Marx and Joseph Lenin. Karl Marx. Take away a nation's heritage, and they are more easily persuaded to communism. Communism begins where atheism begins. The education of all children, from the moment that they can get along without a mother's care, shall be in state institutions. We have no compassion, and we ask no compassion from you. When our turn comes, we shall not make excuses for the terror. The meaning of peace is the absence of opposition to socialism. If you can cut the people off from their history, then they can be easily persuaded. The democratic concept of man is false, because it is Christian. The democratic concept holds that each man is a sovereign being. This is the illusion, dream, and postulate of Christianity. There are, besides, eternal truths, such as freedom, etc., that are common to all states of society. But communism abolishes eternal truths, it abolishes all religion, and all morality, instead of constituting them on a new basis. It therefore acts in contradiction to all past historical experience. The theory of communism may be summed up in one sentence: abolish all private property. The communists everywhere support every revolutionary movement against the existing social and political order of things. They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. A heavy or progressive or graduated income tax is necessary for the proper development of communism. The first requisite for the happiness of the people is the abolition of religion. The unity is brought about by force. From each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. Taxes are the source of life for the bureaucracy, the army and the court, in short, for the whole apparatus of the executive power. Strong government and heavy taxes are identical. Note, if you will stop and think, you will realize that all of these aims of Marx are now evident in America's systems and institutions, and most of them have come by violent protests and subversion. Joseph Lenin. Give me your 4-year-olds, and in a generation I will build a socialist state. The press should be not only a collective propagandist and a collective agitator, but also a collective organizer of the masses. The goal of socialism is communism. Why should freedom of speech and freedom of press be allowed? Why should a government which is doing what it believes to be right allow itself to be criticized? It would not allow opposition by lethal weapons. Ideas are much more fatal things than guns. Why should any man be allowed to buy a printing press and disseminate pernicious opinions calculated to embarrass the government? The way to crush the bourgeoisie is to grind them between the millstones of taxation and inflation. People always have been, and they always will be, stupid victims of deceit and self-deception in politics. Give me just one generation of youth, and I'll transform the whole world. One man with a gun can control 100 without one. As an ultimate objective, peace simply means communist world control. Atheism is a natural and inseparable part of Marxism, of the theory and practice of scientific socialism. Our program necessarily includes the propaganda of atheism. It is, of course, much easier to shout, abuse, and howl than to attempt to relate, to explain. Medicine is the keystone of the arch of socialism. One of the basic conditions for the victory of socialism is the arming of the workers' communist and the disarming of the bourgeoisie to the middle class. There are no morals in politics, there is only expedience. A scoundrel may be of use to us just because he is a scoundrel. It is necessary, secretly and urgently, to prepare the terror. The establishment of a central bank is 90% of communizing a nation. There can be nothing more abominable than religion. Note, once again, if you will stop and think, you will realize that all of these aims of Lenin are now evident in America's systems and institutions, and most of them have come by violent protests and subversion. They have not only made great strides toward implementing the goals of their socialist utopia, they have now brazenly stated that they will have achieved their original goal by the year 2030, which is global domination. There are two major obstacles the globalists must still overcome: the United States government and society, and Christianity. Until these two are subdued and eliminated or transformed, the final steps of the globalist one world government system is stymied. The advent of the Joe Biden presidency and the passing into law of his American Rescue Plan Act could be harbingers of the final stages of the transformation of America from a free democratic constitutional republic and a world superpower to merely a cog in the globalization of a socialist United Nations. See, we are getting it wrong in the secret buyout of America. This leaves Christianity and the gospel of Jesus Christ as the final barrier between a free world and a godless socialist Marxist one world government, and the church has been under a relentless attack from within and without for decades and has either been replaced by institutions of religious humanism, falsely using the name of the Christian church, or is being transformed into a religious ecclesiastical hierarchy from the inside, at an alarming rate. A one world church is emerging that is antithetical to the God of Christians and Jews and to the Christ of the Bible. See, the one world church and the false church emerges. Someplace along the way, over the last 2,000 years, it seems that many of the people calling themselves Christians have come to assume that Jesus was either some kind of a progressive left-wing ideologue or a pacifist and have modeled their lives as such. Let's be crystal clear, both assumptions are wrong. Dead wrong. Unfortunately, the church leadership in America has bought into the leftist propaganda that the church should stay out of politics. The problem with that assertion is twofold. Number 1. This has created confusion within the church regarding its mission and methods. The mission and methods of Jesus were never political, but they were both clear and confrontational. Jesus said, "For this purpose I have been born, and for this I have come into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." This, too, is our calling and our method of resistance. To testify to the truth. John 18:37 Therefore Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say correctly that I am a king. For this purpose I have been born, and for this I have come into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." This, too, is our calling and our method of resistance. To bring a sword. Matthew 10:34 Do not think that I came to bring peace on the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. Verse 35 For I came to turn a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Verse 36 And a person's enemies will be the members of his household. This, too, is our calling and our method of resistance. To fulfill the law. Matthew 5:17 Do not presume that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill the law and the prophets. This, too, is our calling and our method of resistance. To call sinners. Mark 2:17 And hearing this, Jesus said to them, It is not those who are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick. I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners. This, too, is our calling. To save the world. John 12:47 If anyone hears my teachings and does not keep them, I do not judge him, for I did not come to judge the world, but to save the world. In a very real sense, this, too, is our calling and our method of resistance, by lifting the name of Jesus, telling others and leading them to him. To cast fire and bring division upon the earth. Luke 12:49 I have come to cast fire upon the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. Verse 50 But I have a baptism to undergo, and how distressed I am until it is accomplished. Verse 51 Do you think that I came to provide peace on earth? No, I tell you, but rather to create division. This, too, is our calling and our method of resistance. Number 2. The Church through the teachings of the Bible explains and defines politics. It is true that the Church should not become political, nor should it let the contemporary politics influence or become the message of the Church. The gospel of Jesus Christ, his life, his teachings, his work of salvation by his death and his resurrection are the core message of the Bible and the Church. But when the gospel is correctly understood and the life and message of Jesus is correctly lived out with conviction, politics are defined within the framework of the Judeo-Christian ethos. Also see the American Civil Wars over Judeo-Christian values. What he really meant. John 14:12 Truly, truly I say to you, the one who believes in me, the works that I do, he will do also, and greater works than these he will do, because I am going to the Father. 13 And whatever you ask in my name, this I will do, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. 14 If you ask me anything in my name, I will do it. I have heard so many preachers and Bible teachers try to justify or explain away these words of Jesus because they just cannot fathom the gentle and sweet dashboard Jesus saying such things as we find in the verses cited. These same confused preachers really get tied in a knot over John 14:12. They will begin their commentary of teaching it with, what this really means is. Jesus said what he meant and meant exactly what he said. We need to get over it and get on with it. Jesus always taught the will of his Father, then demonstrated what he taught. He expects us to do the same. Ephesians, chapter 6, gives us a clear teaching and picture of the type of preparation and resolve we are to assume. Stand firm. Ephesians 6:10-17, Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the full armor of God, so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the full armor of God, so that you will be able to resist in the evil day, and having done everything, to stand firm. Stand firm therefore, having girded your loins with truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace, in addition to all, taking up the shield of faith with which you will be able to extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. And take the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. Your brother and friend, Mike Young. P.S. Let's please remember that God takes no pleasure in those who shrink back. Let's boldly advance the message of the gospel and speak the truth in the face of the opposition. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God and he will draw near to you.